What's up, guys? Shane here from the GnG Elite DBS team, and today we're going to talk about how to properly utilize your silver bullet cards in the team battles environments that you can't share cards. You know, only one of y'all gets Kami, only one of y'all gets Dende, etc., etc. So, if you're not aware, the best strategy to go into Team Wars is to all be playing decks that rely on different strategies. So, the reason is you want to play those decks optimally. Like, for example, in Atlanta, I played Broly Veggies, Marcus played Shenron Super 17, and Trevor played Janemba. This worked out very well for us because the decks shared 0 cards outside of, the typical silver bullets. So there was no argument as to who's playing what. Even though Marcus and I both played green, we didn't share any of the same green cards. Excuse me. Anyway, an example of a bad team comp would probably be something like Shenron Gogeta, Janemba, and Blue-Black Hirudegarn, and any combination of those two in the same team comp, simply because you're all arguing for Senzu Bean and other cards. You know, you want your decks to be optimal, so I think any team comp involving, cards that share important, or decks that share important cards is going to probably be in for a rough time. So, anyway, let's go ahead and get into these silver bullets. So, first, Crisis Crusher. He's a 3-drop, 5k, permanent if there are no battle cards to play in your battle area. Reduce the energy cost of this card in your hand by 2, so if you have no battle cards in play, he costs 1. Players can't attack with battle cards with energy costs of 1, and once per turn, choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards with an energy cost of 1 and KO it. So this is going to be very important for whichever deck in your comp is struggling with the aggro decks, more or less red specifically. It would be very hard for something like Veggies to play this because they always have cards in their battle area. Now, for example, in our team comp, both Shenron, Hand Control, Super 17, whatever you want to call it, and Janemba can both utilize this card. Though, I do believe Marcus is going to end up with this card in our team comp simply because he needs a way to help lessen the blow against these red decks. And he doesn't get striving to be the best on Goku, Janemba gets that. So he'll get Crisis Crusher, the way they both sort of have an answer to those decks to help slow them down. I don't think there's anything else really to mention with this card. That's probably going to be about it. It's probably going to be one of the least talked about ones in the bunch. Next we have Dende. Dende's a 1-drop 3k with Deflect. Auto, when you play this card, draw a card. So worst case scenario, he's just a 1-drop cantrip. Activate main for 2. Place this card in your drop area if your opponent places a card in their energy using a skill during this game. Choose one of your opponent's energy and place it in its owner's drop area. Now, I'm not sure if the ruling or RADA, whatever you want to call it, will be in place or when exactly that takes place. I don't know if it happens like immediately or when set 6 drops. I'm not sure. So I'm just going to kind of ignore that for now. They did essentially make her once per game, or him once per game, which needed to happen. This card was going to get really busted in set 6. But for now, let's just, roll with what we've been doing, and if this is wrong, this is wrong. I'm sorry. Ideally, this card's really weak outside of Child's Wish decks because it's hard to abuse it. Though the Child's Wish decks could easily lock the objection decks down at 3 or 4 energy and stop them from getting to their win condition, Gogeta. So, your Child's Wish deck is typically going to be the deck to get this, and if you don't have a Child's Wish deck, then it kind of opens it up a bit more. But, our team comp is playing a Child's Wish deck, because Marcus is playing several Child's Wish in his Super 17 build. So, for our team comp, Marcus would be the one to get this card, because he can properly use it to lock Shenron Gogeta out of the matchup and secure the win. Now, you could give this to Janemba or other slower decks, as they'll have the energy to sink into it. But it's not as impactful and probably just not even worth playing, honestly. Next, Dark Power Black Mass Sand. So, Dark Power Black Mass Sand does help hinder the Chain Attack Xeno decks. Not by a huge margin, but it does help. Your opponent losing 2 cards is important. It's also a good Self-Awakener for some decks that kind of lack that. Now, a deck that can really, utilize this card to its max is Janemba, because Janemba has a rough matchup against Chain Attack Xeno. However, your opponent negging 2 to do it will help improve that. And not only that, against some of these degenerate combo decks, like the Broly decks or Shenron Gogeta, as Janemba, you want to be at 7 life. That way you go from 7 to 4. When they attack you when you're 4, you can awaken, go from 4 to 1, and then when they attack you while you're 1, you can use your leader negate. that's very important against those decks. So Janemba probably ends up with this card for those two reasons. Now, Janemba could just play Awakening Talent Pan, but this would free up more deck space for other cards. So you probably end up going with this just to, you know, have a wider option available to you in your 65. Now, the reasoning for Trevor getting this, like, Trevor will get this in our team comp since he's playing Janemba. Shenron Super 17 already does fairly well into the red decks, just because they do relatively poor against hand control in general. And Veggies has Cold Bloodlust. Now, granted, Cold Bloodlust won't stop them from playing Killy Zone, but Veggies has a hard time recovering from a Zeno play anyway. So, I mean, if they resolve Zeno, they resolve Zeno. Hopefully you have Bloodlust and they don't have Killy Zone. Alright, next we got Kami. So, with Kami, he's again a 1-cost 3K. Auto, when you play this card, draw a card, activate main 2. Your opponent has 4 more battle cards in play. Choose all of your cards and your opponent's battle cards with energy, cost 4 or less, ignoring barrier, and KO them. So this is going to be important for decks that are weak to strategies that go wide. Any deck that's weak to Broly Veggies, any deck that's weak to, say, red decks, you know, this could come in handy. I'm trying to think of any other decks that go wide. I don't think there's too many of them right now. The swap decks kind of go wide, so that could be useful there as well. You just kind of have to hope your opponent walks into it and just kind of doesn't respect it. So, typically Shenron decks aren't going to need Kami just because they have Purunga. Now, that doesn't mean in singles they don't need Kami, because, you know, having both is great. But in a team battles type situation, if you have a deck that's not Shenron that is weak to these strategies, it's best to give that deck Kami, just because Shenron has access to Purunga, which is somewhat similar in abilities. On that note, for our team comp, Janemba is also going to get this card, just to help it against the decks like Veggies, Red, and just in general any deck where the player isn't respecting it. Just because, you know, in Broly Veggies, I'm weak to this card, so I don't want to play it, and I also just don't want to sink 3 mana into it. And Marcus will have access to Purunga in his Shenron deck. So, oh, just a note, go back on Dark Power Black Mass Saiyan. I know I forgot to read his abilities, I'm sorry. On the Dende. Back to the note on Dende. It is relatively useful in the Shenron Gogeta mirror match, just by setting your opponent back a turn when you're both trying to get to the same turn to end the game. So that could be relevant. That's probably the deck I'd give it to, is Shenron Gogeta. But anyway, last but not least, for the Silver Bullets, we have Cronoa. So this is probably the big hot debate one, where everybody wants Cronoa. Excuse me. So, Deflect. Auto, when you play this card, draw a card, and your opponent may not play battle cards from their hand with the skills of cards with super combo for the duration of the game. So she turns off Shugesh. Everybody wants to turn off Shugesh in team battles because only one of the 3 can have Cronoa, so everyone's playing Shugesh. Now, how do you decide who gets Cronoa? Typically, most players will claim the answer to this is, does your endgame die to Shugesh Kid Goku? However, in best of 3, it's not that simple. Now, when you're playing best of 1 team battles, it is that simple. But in best of 3, it's not. It's very easy for these Shugesh decks to mainboard 3 to 4 Kid Goku, Explosive Spirit, and then sideboard 2 to 4 copies of Vegeta striving to be the best, to just Shugesh Vegeta, your barrier threat. So, it's just not that simple. Now, you have to choose wisely when deciding who to give Cronoa to. Shenron Gogeta, Shenron hand control variants like Super 17, and Janemba are all decks that don't really need Cronoa. Simply because, you know, with hand control, they're not going to have a hand, so they're not probably not going to be able to Shugesh Kid Goku you, or Shugesh Vegeta you, whatever. Shenron Gogeta, you're going to reset their hand anyway, so they probably won't have it. Janemba, you're not really attacking outside of at all cost. So, typically, these decks won't need it. Your red decks are probably the main decks that are going to need it, in my opinion. But that's just me. The yellow decks also can, keep in mind, when your opponent plays Shugesh, you can Cold Bloodlust on the play of Shugesh to negate the effects of anything that comes into play from Shugesh. So, yellow decks especially don't need it, as they can just hold up that play. Now, in our team comp, none of our decks necessarily need Cronoa. But my guess is Janemba is going to be the one to play it, just so they can always threaten the at-all-cost Vegeta play to end the game. Since all these Shugesh decks are going to be at 3 or less life usually anyway, we want to be able to threaten that. Though there is an argument for all three of the decks. Janemba probably makes the most sense. Sorry, I'm just like constantly sick apparently. Anyway, granted, veggies could play it just to swing the matchup even more in the mirror into their favor by allowing you. Well, I don't know. Does it shut off you or just your opponent? Yeah, it's just your opponent. So you could shut out your opponent's Shugash and still have yours, and that probably is enough to swing the game usually. So that's relevant. Other than that, though, you got to be very careful who you decide to give Cronoa to. Like, just always think of the bigger picture, not just what's best for you. It's not about you, it's about your team, and you need to think about what's best for your team. Now, kind of like an honorable mention, I guess, so to say, let's talk about Toki Toki. We play Toki Toki in Trevor's Janemba deck during Atlanta for team battles, and could be really important. So, Toki Toki is auto when you play this card, you place it on top of your deck. If you do so, choose up to one black battle card with 3,000 power from your deck and play it, and then shuffle your deck. So, Toki Toki tutors Dende, Kami, and Cronoa. So, if you just so happen to end up with... sorry. 2 to 3 of those in the same deck, you can use Toki Toki to free up space. So instead of sideboarding like 2 Dende, 3 Kami, 3 Cronoa, you can do like 1 Dende, 2 Kami, 2 Cronoa, and 2 Toki Toki, or things of that nature just to help free up a little bit of card space. Toki Toki is really clutch, especially for decks that are playing multiples of, you know, Cronoa, Kami, or Dende. Like, if you say you want 4 Cronoa, 3 Kami, you can do 2 Kami, 2 Cronoa, and 2 to 3 Toki Toki. Probably just 2. 2 would probably be fine. So that just frees up, even if it just frees up 1 slot in your 65, that could be crucial. You know, you never want to take card slots for granted. Anyways, guys, that's it for my video on Silver Bullets. Hopefully this helped you at least a little bit, or maybe you learned something. I think it's one of those things where a lot of players struggle when building their team comps for team battles. So hopefully it helped. And I guess just like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned for some more videos for team battles this upcoming week. We're going to try and get at least a couple more out to try and help y'all before Orlando. But stay elite.